Judy Baldwin, promo for The Visible Woman for June 18th. 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for The Visible Woman. Join me Sunday at 5 when my guest will be Libby Gregory. Libby is the owner of Byzantium, which is a very special beads shop here in Columbus, Ohio, and the King Avenue Coffee Shop, which is not really a coffee shop. It's actually a vegetarian restaurant. Join me Sunday at 5. This is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for The Visible Woman. My guest today is Libby Gregory. She's owner of Byzantium and the King Avenue Coffee Shop. And by explanation, I should tell you that both of these shops are in the campus area, close to the campus area, Neal and King Avenue. The Byzantium is a bead shop and a specialty bead shop, but they also have many other things in there. Libby, how would you describe Byzantium?
Well, the focus is definitely beads, but we also have other items. We sell art cards, some tapestries from various countries, a little bit of imported clothing, some books, especially ones that relate to beads and beading.
Oh, you had some beautiful scarves the other day.
Yeah, we have those too.
Yeah.
So there's some accessory items too, but the main focus point is beads.
And there's certainly all different kinds of beads. I mean, you have primarily glass beads.
Yeah, and the focus there too on the beads is less on craft, more on jewelry. But we love almost all kinds of beads. Probably about 3/4 of what we have is glass, but it runs a wide gamut from the antique trade beads to modern things that cost a penny each or less.
I was amazed at how many beads you can get for just a few dollars, too. You know, of course, I go in there and go crazy. And then Libby also owns King Avenue Coffee Shop, and it adjoins the Byzantium, and King Avenue Coffee Shop is a vegetarian restaurant.
Right.
It's absolutely wonderful fare. And as my listeners know, I dedicate the show to women who are changing the status of women from invisible to visible, and certainly in those two areas, Libby is ever present and always willing to help people out in the store, which has been wonderful for me. I just started doing beadwork in the last year. And Libby, before we got on the air, you were talking about the fact that beads seem to be part of our culture, even going back far when we're really young people. Would you sort of go back and explain that? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah, well, Judy had just asked me when I started working with beads, and I said that I had ever since I was a child, and that I thought that we all played with beads when we were little. In some cases, we took apart Mommy's jewelry, the ones that she allowed us to take apart. Other times, someone might have given us a bead kit, and we played with beads. And then at some point, maybe when we're 7 or 8, we might stop, either because there aren't beads available or because we become interested in other things. I remember one of my all-time favorite toys when I was little was a piece of jewelry that probably was Edwardian and was in my mother's family. I have no idea what it really was, but it was beaded all the way around with antique steel cuts. And I still have that thing, and it's probably one of my most treasured possessions. It's probably not worth a lot, but I played with it constantly when I was little. Now I have lots more steel cuts than are on that piece, and I hoard them because you can't find steel cuts.
What are steel cuts?
Well, beads have been used for all different purposes. Steel cuts are made of steel, and they're cut beads that were actually forged by people who worked steel, and they were originally developed, it's believed, to decorate armor and to decorate swords and the sheaths that swords go into. Being steel, they rust, so you have to keep them away from water. But they're one of the first super shiny beads that were ever made. Now, of course, we have lots of different kinds of shiny beads that aren't gemstones. and consequently are terribly expensive, like beads that have a mirror lining so that they reflect light. But
well, now would that be something like the little silver line
exactly
beads that I've got?
Okay. Yeah, it's silvering like a mirror. You can call them mirror lined or silver lined.
Okay.
But the steel cuts were originally developed for something other than jewelry, and then they passed. They were made for probably about 400 years, and they stopped being made in around the turn of the century. You can still find beaded purses with steel cuts on them. Often you find rust right there with the steel cut. But collectors will pay $15 to $20 a hank for steel cuts if they can find them, because they're no longer available. They were made in France, they were made in Germany, they were made in England.
Well, is no one making them at this point?
As far as we know, no one's making them.
Then we should tell our listeners too what a hank is, because
that's a good idea.
That was something that I was so proud of when I knew what a hank was right away. A hank is about 12 strands of beads.
Of course, it varies with the beads, but yeah, with standard beads these days, it's about 12 strands that are about 16 inches long. And you can remember by the fact that it's like a hank of hair, and that's probably what it's named after. Beads were hand-strung by ladies in the glass factories. They might take them home as a cottage industry to string them up. They would use a handful of needles on a wooden tray and scoop them up with the needles, and they would know by sight and by feel how many go onto a hank. And that's even more amazing when you know that a hank, generally speaking, is an ounce. Not always, not right on the nose, but now Venetian beads, if they're hanked at all, are hanked in Taiwan, but the Czechoslovakian beads are still hanked probably by ladies in the Czechoslovakian factories.
That's amazing. Are there bead factories here in the United States?
Not for glass, as far as I know. There are studios that make handmade, lamp-made beads, but they're primarily used in jewelry. They're not sold as individual beads. And then there are some ceramic studios that make beads. There are metal companies that make other metal findings that make beads. There are people who work stones. We know people who make beads individually, but I don't think there are any glass factories that make them.
And so where do you get your beads? I mean, do they come from Czechoslovakia?
Yes, but not directly to me, because I deal with importers who import them.
Okay.
Primarily, those people are mostly in New York, the ones that are importing the European glass.
Now, I just talked to a woman at work who got back from Colorado, and she was looking for bead shops there, and she said there were absolutely no bead shops, at least that she was able to find. And it seems as though we are very lucky here, at least from what I can tell from people outside the area, to have your bead shop, because it looks like it is very difficult to find places. Is that true? Or?
Well, it depends on where you are. If you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, it's easier to find them. Beads are always in fashion, but individuals making things with beads goes in and out of fashion. Among primitive peoples, you'll find that they're always playing with beads. They make the beads, and then if they can obtain glass beads, they make things with glass beads also. But just as children may forget about playing with beads, adults do too. You know, there was a turquoise and liquid silver craze back in the 70s. Well, we still have the beautiful squash blossoms, but you don't see little liquid silver necklaces with turquoise much anymore. People still might have a fondness for them, but you don't find them easily in the stores unless you go to a place that specializes in Native American things. So I think that it rides fads to a certain extent. But if you were to go to San Francisco or San Diego, there would be 4 or 5 places to go in each city. If you were to go to New York, there's an entire bead district, but it's primarily wholesale, not totally, but primarily. So you have to know exactly what you want, or you have to be willing to spend an enormous quantity of money to get one type of bead.
So you're talking about both coasts having a goodly number of bead shops, but here in the center of the country,
not so much, but there are 2 stores in Cleveland now. I don't know the name of one. The other one's Bobby Diddle's Bead Gallery in Cleveland Heights. There's one in Toledo called the Bead Lady. There's a place in Cincinnati that sells some beads. They're primarily a bookstore. I believe they're called the Aquarian Bookstore. Those are the places that I know of for sure in Ohio, but they don't have. They are good stores, but they don't have the kind of range of beads that Byzantium stocks.
You know what amazed me when I first walked into Byzantium, aside from the variety of beads, was the variety of people. I mean, there were as various people as there were beads. It certainly attracts people from all walks of life.
That's right. That's one of my favorite parts about it. The people are all pretty wonderful, but they're very different from each other. Very different. We have little kids. We have punk kids. We have granny ladies. We have the muzzle-loading rifle people who collect trade beads because they're from the era that they want to recreate. All different kinds of people. And it strikes a chord in just about everybody, and the antique trade beads are probably something that really captures the imagination more than anything.
They are so fascinating. I never even had an idea that there was such a thing as an antique trading bead, number one. But then to see them, and I think I asked Libby, I don't know how many times I had to ask you what beads were. And each time I'd go in, I'd learn one bead. And then the next time I'd have you repeat all 19 other kinds again, and then I'd learn another bead. But it was just even learning about chevrons and just the African trade beads, which were so exciting for me. And I guess I want to talk about that, but we have to let people know who we are. And this is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for the Visible Woman. My guest today is Libby Gregory. She's owner of Byzantium and King Avenue Coffee Shop. So I do want to let you talk about the trade beads. So
well, it's hard to know where to start, isn't it? I guess, well, the best place to start is that most of them come from out of West Africa. Nigeria, Ghana, Mali, Cameroon. Some things come from Ethiopia and from East Africa as well, but the bulk of them come from West Africa. When Europeans started dealing on a big level with West African people, they found that West African people did not have monetary systems. They still dealt in barter. Even though they had highly sophisticated cultures, they had kingships, they were forging brass, they were making gold objects, they were blacksmiths. I mean, they had highly developed agriculture, but they didn't have monetary systems. And there are many, many different cultures in West Africa also, and they're different from each other. Lots of different tribes. I'm still beginning to learn. Well, the Europeans wanted from the West Africans, they wanted slaves, gold, ivory, and palm oil. Probably some other goods as well, but those were the 4 main things that they wanted. And, of course, they could use for trade European goods that West Africans wanted. But one of the things that West Africans liked the best was the fancy glass from Venice. Venice is the queen of glass. Venetian glassmakers have been famous for, probably 600 or 700 years. They make beautiful objects And along with the beautiful objects, the vases, the glassware, the stemware, plates, they also make glass beads. Glass beads are usually, the Venetian ones are usually handmade, each one individually by a craftsperson. They're made over a lamp, like a Bunsen burner, that produces a high flame, and wrapped around a mandrel, a metal stick, that's coated with something that's like kiln coat that keeps the glass from sticking to the metal rod. The glass is wrapped, the molten glass is wrapped around the mandrel and then hand decorated with other pieces of glass to make it beautiful. Venetians developed many different kinds of beads. Some of them they reinvented, like the millefiori and the chevrons that were originally
the
millefiori. Yes. Well, the Romans developed them in the first place, and maybe people developed them before that. So it's one of those things that people have rediscovered time and time again. Millefiori means 1,000 flowers. These are the most famous of trade beads among Americans. They were called, they were imported from Morocco in the early 70s, and they were called goulamine beads. And it turns out that these goulamine beads were not, as people said, dug up out of the ground, although they might have been from burials. They weren't made by Moroccans. As a matter of fact, they were traded across the Sahara from West Africa into Morocco and purchased by Europeans and Americans in Morocco.
But they actually came from West Africa.
I mean, there may very well have been millefiori among the Berber people in Morocco too, but most of them crossed the Sahara. So they were valuable to people. But a millefiori has dozens of little intricate patterns all over the surface of the bead. And it's made by rolling a glass rod on a marble plate with other glass rods to pick up a pattern, so that if you were to look at the end of the glass rod, you'd see the pattern. Then there's sliced little bitty slivers of glass and applied to a molten bead. And then the bead maker twirls it to make it, not to make it run and all go in together, but to make it a unit. Most of the famous millefiori beads are at least 150 years old. And the colors are very subtle often. Sometimes they're loud, but the Venetians are still making millefiori, but they're much louder now. There's lots more bright red and bright cobalt together rather than browns and greens together.
How do you, I know you've been doing this for a long time, so that you have a sense of whether something is really 150 years old, but how do you start to know those things?
Well, there are things that have been published fairly recently, and there are authorities. Peter Francis wrote the first series of books that was pretty authoritative about trade beads and antique beads. He started the Center for Bead Research in Lake Placid, New York, and he is a frequent contributor to the bead magazine known as Ornament. Ornament used to be called the Bead Journal, and then the folks who started it realized that the ball hadn't really gotten started enough, so they incorporated a lot of other adornment arts and called it Ornament. So they cover modern jewelry making as well. But there are always features on old beads and uses of beads and people currently making beads. So Ornament is a very good source too. It's written so that lay people can understand it, but yet they try to make sure of all their sources. They document things. They interview individuals to try and get information straight. So that's a very good source as well. It's often available at the library. There's also a giant book that was published in late '87 called The History of Beads. It's published by Abrams, and it's expensive. It's about $65. But it has color plates. The information is pretty solid, and it has a wonderful little timetable in the back that shows pictures of beads and talks about when they were first made and if they were common or not. Picard, who's an importer in San Diego, I believe, has published some small books showing lots and lots of African trade beads, color pictures. Privately published, so it's quite expensive too, but it tries to date some of the things. Mostly you can tell by historic record.
Are there records that come with a bead?
Oh no,
okay.
It's much more lax than that.
Yeah.
Because the way we get them is that we buy them from traders who are in general black gentlemen who buy them in the marketplaces in West Africa and import them into the U.S. And they just show up with their suitcases and sit down and spread them all out and then stand there in awe and try to pick them out. Some of the traders are extremely knowledgeable, and others don't know much of anything at all. But we have our favorites, and we know who is likely to know something. So we use them for resources too. The importers also are often very knowledgeable, and you learn who you can trust for information.
If someone came to you and said, I would like a particular very, very old bead, let's say I would like a bead, a cobalt bead that's 100 or 200 years old, from a particular part of the world. Would you have a way to search for that, to find that kind of bead? Do you have those kinds of beads? Can you take a particular request and
Kill it?
Yeah.
We should try, and it might very well take 6 months to a year to even find out if such a thing exists. There is a gentleman who is an importer and dealer in Cincinnati called Walt Seafried. He has a business called iBead, and he's one of our favorite references. He's very trustworthy, and he deals in antiquities as well as antiques. And he has good sources for finding out information if he doesn't know himself. And if I were looking for a particular bead and he didn't know, then I would start talking to my favorite traders and find out if they'd ever heard of such a thing. But it would probably be good to find out in the first place if the person making such a request knows that such a thing exists. I mean, if they're making it up, then it might exist or it might not. But a cobalt, hey, everybody loves cobalt, so it might be everywhere. And 100 for cobalt isn't too old either.
Isn't it?
Yeah, they're 300-year-old cobalt.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That's why it sort of just popped out of my mouth, right? How did you first get more advanced in beading? Let's say, as a young person you did beading, but how did this all grow step by step, Libby? I mean, this is, your store is exciting and wonderful, but my goodness, that had to be a lot of steps.
Well, I'm not really a bead artist. A couple of people who work for me are excellent bead artists. My favorite thing to do is run my fingers through the beads. And I make things for myself, and I make, some earrings, and I'm happy to show people how to do simple things. But I just love beads, and I think, as I said, that it's something that's deep within the human consciousness to adorn ourselves and to make beautiful things. I was a partner in another store, Tradewinds, for 15 years. And once again, when the liquid silver craze was on us, we were buying beads and making things because we found that it was much less expensive than buying things that other people had made up. And then from there, we progressed into making slightly more complicated things for sale in the store. And I also had a massive fascination for Austrian lead crystal, the stuff that the sun shines through and makes rainbows. So I used to make mobiles using beads and those lead crystals. And I suppose that's what I've made the most of in my life. I love sparkly Czechoslovakian beads, faceted beads. But just the fact that something has a hole and you can turn it into jewelry, I think is totally astounding. And we've been doing it for thousands of years. I guess my love of beads just kept on growing. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I decided that the location of the shop that I was involved in was a dead end, that the shop was alive and my partnership was alive, but it was very cramped. It was owned by someone else, and I really felt as though I couldn't grow anymore, that we couldn't get more merchandise, we couldn't try out new things, we could barely turn around. So I determined that I was going to do two things, that I was going to have another store with lots of room, and that I was going to have a coffee house so that people would have an intellectual place to hang around. Because I really feel that OSU campus is it's populated strongly by very smart, wonderful people. They have so few places to go. High Street is a pit that is lit by a few bright stars, but there are very few privately owned businesses. If you go to any other college campus the size of OSU, you will see that there are many shops that specialize in handcrafts, many real bookstores, coffee houses, cute restaurants, all kinds of things. But because High Street is so tightly held by people who want to make money off the land, who can afford to be there, bars and fast food. So I determined that I was going to change that. When we started the coffee house, I had the mistaken idea that if it was there and people wanted it, and I knew people wanted it, that it would make money. I didn't realize, even though I'd been in retail for years, that I needed to have something to sell.
Now, wait a minute. You started the coffee house first, right? Or what,
No.
you were doing this both at
I was doing it both at the same time.
same time.
It was horrifying.
I guess. I mean, you have to back up a little bit, okay? Because did you go and buy those two places?
No, they were empty.
Oh, they were empty.
Yeah.
All right.
I bought the building.
You bought the building.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't anything there.
No. It's a beautiful 100-year-old building that sort of accidentally got put on the national landmarks.
It's on King Avenue, folks. We should tell people exactly where it is, too. It's on King Avenue, just east of Neal, in the campus area.
And it's a darling old building. It's a pretty sound building, but, well, originally it had housed a fine old grocery store and a fine old pharmacy for years and years and years. And then in the late 50s and early 60s, those businesses passed out of existence. And for a while, there was a laundromat there. For a while, it was a photo studio. And most recently, before I bought the building, it was a used furniture store that was not of the best order. We found dead beer bottles everywhere, moldy beer bottles, and
I mean, what a massive undertaking.
Yeah, we basically had to almost rebuild the inside. And it took a long time. I've always
did. Well, did you get a small business loan? I mean, I'm just really curious how you were able to. I mean, that seems so massive. It's quite an undertaking.
Well, I think part of the reason why I was able to succeed was because I was so naive. I had money, some money, because at that point my parents had both died and left me my inheritance. But it wasn't a great deal of money. It was about $20,000.
That's not.
No, but I was pretty naive. I thought that I could do it. That's right. After long struggling, I started out with way too little money. I had no idea. I figured that once I had the building under my arm, which was hard enough, that it would be okay. Just sort of smooth sailing. It would be all right. But instead, even though I knew something about city regulations, building permits, all kinds of electrical permits, and the plumbing, and then, the cost of starting a restaurant is prohibitive, horrifying.
Well, you'd have to get everything right. I mean, you're talking about silverware and cups and just everything, and the equipment to cook with,
which is far more expensive.
There was nothing in there.
So it was a shell.
This is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for the Visible Woman. My guest today is Libby Gregory. She's the owner of Byzantium and King Avenue Coffee Shop. And really, we should tell people about the coffee shop, too, because by far, it's just a most wonderful place to eat, incredibly comfortable. It's vegetarian, which you can't find anymore around the city at all, except there, evidently.
Well, there's certainly places that serve vegetarian food, but we're the only exclusively vegetarian place.
So you had the building, and you had to deal with all the regulations. How long did all of that take?
It took 5 months before I could open Byzantium, and
you sit there. And the specials, in particular, I try and pay attention to. I remember last fall when I had this most magnificent acorn squash. I mean, I wish I could have sat there and had 2 or 3 more dinners because it was so good. Do you make up the menus? Do you have someone else who does that?
No, we have a manager, and we have 3 people cooking, one of whom cooks the most. And basically between the manager and the cooks, they divide the food. The manager, his name is Robert Metzger. He's totally wonderful. And basically he, within my guidelines, does what he wants because I'm blessed to have him, and I've got enough business on my hands because I have to manage the building as well as Byzantium. But I'm a vegetarian, and that's why the place is vegetarian. Not everyone who works there is, but the ones who work there like the food very much, and it's pretty accessible food. There are some things that people from Central Ohio may never have run into before, but I mean, you can start out with a cheese sandwich. That's pretty easy. And there are a number of Middle Eastern spreads that we serve either as a plate or as a sandwich. Hummus and baba ganoush. We serve tabbouleh. We of course have a big tossed salad for people. And as you mentioned, we have daily soups and daily specials. We do serve a lot of dairy because it makes it much easier to obtain protein that way, as well as the fact that it's a lot more accessible to people. A lot easier to understand the food, understand the flavors, if there's dairy in it, if there's cheese, and eggs and milk. And my main focus for being a vegetarian, although I think that being health conscious is great, we all should be more health conscious. I should be. But my main focus is because of the animals. And so we don't preach too much about vegetarianism. I mean, we're not interested in converting people. We don't want them bringing in any meat. But basically, it's a pretty comfortable place.
Oh, very comfortable. And I can remember the time when I first came to Byzantium, and I said, do you have any leather strips that I could string some beads on? And Libby looked at me and she said, well, I'm a vegetarian and I wouldn't consider having leather here. She said, but I do have some wonderful satin strings. And I thought, oh my goodness. And you didn't preach at me, okay, and you were very kind about how you told me. And I certainly had a greater understanding, and that was such a nice way to do it, and I appreciate it, and I probably haven't had a chance to say that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, yeah. The other thing that in the coffee shop that I think people should know about, when you walk in the coffee shop, the aroma is just wonderful because we haven't mentioned the coffee. And of course, there's hazelnut coffee, which is my favorite. But where do you get those coffees from? Are they from this I mean, do you get them from buyers here, or are they from all over the world?
Well, we're dealing with two sources. We're dealing with a major buyer here, and we're also dealing with South Coffee. And South has marvelous things. He roasts and grinds his own. Of course, we have our own grinder, so we don't need him to grind, but he has phenomenal things. He's out in Grandview.
Mm-hmm.
And he sells to us as well as selling to a number of other places and selling there in his own shop. The hazelnut's pretty amazing.
Oh,
That's actually from a mainstream supplier. It's the best hazelnut I've ever had. Yeah.
The smell is so great. I think anyone going in there, if you like coffee at all, you just have to have some of it because it's so good.
Another thing I'm real proud of is we have, I think at this point, over 60 varieties of tea. And that's probably about half black teas, caffeinated teas from the tea plant, and half herbals. So there's something there for everybody, really. Our blends are from very small companies, or else we make them ourselves. So we don't have things like celestial seasonings ones. But we can always recommend something similar if you have a favorite that's celestial seasonings.
I didn't realize you had that many teas.
Mm-hmm. When you're running both businesses, since you have to manage both places, your time, how is your time worked out? I mean, do you have to keep the books too for both Byzantium, or do you have someone who keeps the books for you?
Well, we have a regular bookkeeper.
Okay.
Who deals with the payroll and the taxes and all that sort of thing. And we provide him with the information, but payroll is the biggest headache. So that's taken off our hands by having a wonderful bookkeeper.
Okay, so you've been able to hire a bookkeeper to do that.
Well, he has his own service, so he's out of the house, but he's been great.
What's the hardest part of owning your own business?
Getting through the first 3 or 4 years. Never knowing when you're going to have time to get all the things done you want to get done. We now have a manager on duty in the coffee house, either the manager or an assistant manager, all the time that we're open, so that I don't, even though I'm always on call, I don't have to be there at any particular moment. So that's really good. When I first started them, I was working between 90 and 100 hours a week.
I'm sure.
And now I'm down to probably between 60 and 70, which I think is okay. Sometimes it gets too much, but it's not like a work where somebody tells you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly irritations, there's frustration involved, but being free, you're still tied by your schedule, of course, but being free to make your own decisions, being free to change things, help things grow, make things more interesting is very liberating. And I also feel, I guess it's a good thing to say on your show because of what you're doing, that I don't think that I'm a big role model, but I think me being here, doing these things, makes it clear to other women that they can do it. And I'm happy to let them know they can do it. Actually, guys too, there should be a lot more small business. It's hard. It's real hard. But it's a lot nicer than working for somebody else. Now, there's good jobs and there's good bosses, and I hope I'm a good boss. I try to be a good boss. And I'm glad to provide some decent jobs. But there's a lot of awful jobs out there, and there are a lot of people who suffer under awful jobs who maybe they can't help it because they have to support a family and they don't have the time or the wherewithal to make another job. But, if you have any freedom at all and you have dreams, you should seek them. And, you should stick with it and do it because the world is a very beautiful place and you can help make it more beautiful.
Oh, Libby, thanks. I needed to hear that, too. This is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for the Visible Woman. My guest today is Libby Gregory. She's the owner of Byzantium and King Avenue Coffee Shop, and should let people again know where you are, because it's obviously on King Avenue, just east of Neal. It's on the south side, just around the corner. And there are, if you turn to the right as you pass, if you're riding with someone, if you turn to the right into the alley, is just as you pass Byzantium, and go maybe not even 100 yards, there's some parking spaces on the left-hand side in case the street is crowded. Yeah. And I think there's an area, too, the Bead Society. I was so happy to see that there was a Bead Society, in which I ended up joining. And that must have been formulated just recently, too, within the past, is it? Or has this been ongoing? Or
Well, no. There are bead societies scattered across the U.S., and they're all friends, but none of them are connected in any way other than loose friendships. Big sister or mother one is in Los Angeles. There's one in Washington, D.C. I think there's a new one in New York City. And there are ones scattered across the country. We have a pretty good-sized membership. We have a membership of about 60 people, which is fairly large.
It's a group.
Yeah. Basically, the society meets about once a month to learn about beads and to learn about business and beadwork and other people's lifestyles in regard to beads. Last time, a number of us just took a field trip to Friendship, Indiana.
Oh, and I missed that. Oh, my gosh, I was so disappointed. Friendship, tell me what it was like just to go there. We discussed it the other day, but I want my listeners to hear about it.
Well, I didn't know exactly what to expect. Friendship is the home of the Muzzle Loading Rifle Association. Now, I'm a vegetarian, and shooting things with guns, live things with guns, makes me very upset. It hurts my stomach. But, there's all different lifestyles on Earth, and I'm certainly not going to berate somebody for doing something. Well, muzzle loaders are a little different anyway, because they're working with guns that are a lot older in design than modern guns, and it takes a lot longer to prepare a gun to shoot, so that you have to be sure that what you're aiming at is what you want to shoot, because it takes a long time to reload. One of the muzzle loaders told me a story about how some people with an automatic weapon were shooting at a target, and they just cut the ground all up. They couldn't knock the target over with 30 seconds worth of shooting, and the muzzle loaders hit it like that because they know how to aim. It's really much more of a sport than most modern weaponry. Also, at Friendship, they're shooting at targets, so it doesn't really disturb me in the least. The people are great. They're mostly middle-class folks who, this is a different aspect of their life. Some of them would really like to be living in the past, but they're not. They're not wacko or anything. They like to dress up in beads and buckskins. The ladies are wearing calico and Native American dresses. They're all bedecked with beads. They just really look great. There are lots of places to buy things there. Some of the traders set up. There's a giant flea market that's not associated with the muzzleloaders group, but people shop there. And there must be over 100 booths there with everything from junk to antiques and everything in between. At the actual muzzleloader site, you can camp if you're a member. And there's junk food for sale there and some decent food. And people selling all kinds of things related to the eras that they're trying to recreate, as well as all kinds of things related to the muzzle-loading rifles. And so it was fascinating. The people were wonderful. They're very generous and warm.
I plan on being there next year. I'm so jealous.
It was neat.
Yeah. Libby has started a sort of a museum at Byzantium, and one of my absolute favorite items in the museum is the Maasai necklace, or whatever you call it.
The big collars that women wear. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is so massive, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do want to ask you if someone contacted you ahead of time who was visually impaired, would they be able to tactily perhaps see that collar with you there?
Sure. Yeah, especially if we could deal with it on a weekday, because the weekends are so crazy.
You call it Libby Gregory at Byzantium. It is a most gorgeous collar. Could you describe it? Because I've been so intrigued with that collar, and I don't know whether it's the colors of the collar, the size of the collar, or I don't know whether it's the combination of everything that intrigues me. But when I just enjoyed looking at it, So I know it's got to be nice to touch.
It is.
Yeah.
They're really wonderful. They smell great too. They smell like clean but sweaty people. A lot of the old beads smell that way.
Yeah.
It's really neat to smell them. Well, it's concentric rings of beads that are about, a quarter of an inch in diameter. Is that right? Yeah, I guess so. And they probably fan out to be about, I guess they'd be about between 6 and 8 inches wide. And it's primarily a geometric pattern on it in orange and deep blue, and a little bit of light blue, I believe. I think the one I like has the oat beads on it too, the old rounds, the ovals, that I can't find anywhere.
Yeah.
I wonder where those Maasai ladies get those beads.
And then seems to be is there one with a panel going down the front too, or is that something else?
Yeah, we did have one of those. Actually, that one was for sale, and we sold it.
Oh, someone I know is enjoying it. And what made you decide to start the museum? Because it's such a great idea.
Well, I sometimes cannot resist buying beautiful things, even if I know there really isn't a market for them. And so I have displayed some of these things and shown them to other people who, like Judy, thinks they're wonderful, but it's not necessarily something that you would wear in this society. And some of them are expensive, too. So I feel as though people have a right to see this stuff. That not only will eventually the antique beads not be available at a price that people can afford, but the pieces that are made up, the old pieces, won't be available. And they shouldn't, they can be in a private collection. I mean, that's all right, for heaven's sake. I mean, people have all kinds of collections. But the idea of having something that people can come and visit, and they can see the work, and they can see how old it is, and see the span of things that people have done with beads, it's another way of trying to give something, and I want people to know how much I appreciate their business and their goodwill, and this is a way of helping give back.
Because it is so beautiful, and I never thought too much about the patience and also the meditative quality of doing beadwork.
Well, let's talk about why we call it a bead. You know that, don't you?
No. Okay. No, I don't.
Well, bead is named after saying the Beatitudes,
oh my gosh,
it's named after the Rosary. And that's all over Western Europe.
Libby, I don't believe it.
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's so simple, and I didn't know that. And it's so obvious.
Yes, because of rosaries, and rosaries are made of beads. And, of course, people use prayer beads and worry beads all over the world, too. I mean, the Buddhists have prayer beads, too. It's another use for beads. Not only do we use them to decorate ourselves and our houses, but we can use them to do a meditative thing. We can use them to pray with or to finger and feel, if we're under stress, like the Greeks and the Turkish gentlemen do with their worry beads. They toss them around in their fingers.
It's so clear now. When last weekend my sister-in-law was in town, and I gave her some beads that I had made, and her comment was, "Judy, these are just like a rosary. She said, I just love them." And she was holding them more than wearing them, and half the time wearing them and holding them. So of course. It is that.
And it's an easy way for you think about the people who were illiterate all over Europe. It's an easy way to keep track of your praying. I mean, you wouldn't, of course, people don't have to be illiterate to use a rosary by a long shot. It can be a useful device anyway, but it's a great learning tool. Abacuses are made with beads.
Oh,
you can count with them, too.
Of course they are. I know that. I had never quite thought of it that way. Counting with beads, praying with beads. Well, what else? There must be a myriad of other things, right? Oh my gosh. I think I'm going to have to look into some of these other books on beads too. Aside from the collar in the museum, just name a couple of the other things that are in there. I know we talked about the one of the necklaces that even tells a story by its
It is a love letter, a Zulu love letter, where the young Zulu women will make one for their sweetheart to tell them how they feel about him, and the young men will wear it proudly to tell everyone that he's got a sweetie, or that somebody thinks he's really hot. There's two Yoruba pieces. The Yoruba are masters of beadwork. They make beaded crowns, and beaded staffs, and beaded statuary. They're fairly famous people in West Africa. They live in Nigeria. There's some examples of European beadwork, notably Czechoslovakian beads and Czechoslovakian necklaces from the turn of the century and later, and just a little tiny bit of Native American beadwork. I don't have very much of that, unfortunately. I have a few pieces of Niagara Falls work that was probably done by Seneca women around the turn of the century. They made it for sale to the tourists, but it's definitely the kind of work that they used to do.
In today's society, in the traditional society, and I don't know whether that's the best way to put it, I feel sorry for the men because I get to wear beads all the time,
That's one good thing about friendship. All those guys got to wear beads.
Yeah.
Dress up, too. They look pretty spiffy.
Yeah.
A lot better than the guys you see on the street, bless their hearts.
Do you think maybe
more
and more guys will be wearing beads?
I think so. But I think that they're more likely to be able to feel comfortable with a simple necklace or with beadwork on a jacket or on a belt or something like that. But, as time turns around and people get looser, I think that they can wear more fantastic things.
Gosh, I get to wear things that go
Well, in Africa, the traditional, the spiffiest stuff is worn by the men.
I've seen that in pictures, certainly. Yeah. In the last minutes that we have here, all right, is there anything that maybe I haven't asked you about that you think is really important, and maybe just in owning a business, about beads, vegetarianism, any of the things that we've touched on that you'd like to share with people?
Well, I think that people should be creative, and be adventurous too, and take their own lives in their own hands and do things with it. It's a beautiful planet. It's getting hurt very badly. We need to change that. We need to make life beautiful for one another and for ourselves, and let all the green things grow.
Thank you. Libby's going to bring me to tears here before my closing. Libby, thanks so much for joining me. My guest today has been Libby Gregory. She's owner of Byzantium and King Avenue Coffee Shop, which is located on King Avenue, just east of Neal. And just give Libby a call if you want to come in and see some of the items in the museum, too.
Sure.
This is Judy Baldwin at Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for the Visible Woman. For my listeners, have a wonderful day because you deserve it. So we're going to get out of here.
Right.
It would be funny. You could probably close up the whole place and leave us still sitting here. Judy Baldwin, promo for the Visible Woman for June 18th. 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is Judy Baldwin at the Central Ohio Radio Reading Service for the Visible Woman. Join me Sunday at 5 when my guest will be Libby Gregory. Libby is the owner of Byzantium, which is a very special beads shop here in Columbus, Ohio, and the King Avenue Coffee Shop, which is not really a coffee shop. It's actually a vegetarian restaurant. Join me Sunday at 5.